Here's somebody who's written an email, says, as you've mentioned in the past, often in the past, the world runs on imitation love. Yeah, I probably have said that often. Imitation love stories are everywhere. Disney movies, Hollywood movies, television dramas, comedies, popular music, all the way back through Shakespeare to the plays of ancient Greece. They are all imitation love stories. Yeah, they really are. It's kind of horrifying because everyone, because they've gone back forever and everybody goes and watches Disney movies, everybody believes that this is how life is supposed to be. If something is common enough, then it becomes normal, then even desirable. Once a lie is firmly established in a culture as the truth, then that culture is, as we would say in really technical psychological language, terminally screwed. It's awful. Rome fell apart not because of the invading hordes, but because they became incredibly decadent. Their behavior, their misbehavior, actually became normal. Alexander and his conquering ways in other countries and some of the other habits that he brought along with him. And now in our culture, it's magic and entitlement and fairy tales. It's like somebody once said, when you're adding a long series of numbers, if you make a mistake on adding the first two, your result is guaranteed to be wrong. Doesn't matter how many numbers there are. We've got the foundation wrong. It's, we sort of go tisk tisk. It's fatal. It's that bad. We have Time magazine covers on every other subject in the world, wars, politics, child development. Nobody's talking about the fact that there's an underlying lie to everything we do, especially how we get together with other people. The writer continues, every Tuesday night you share wonderful stories of people learning about real love and changing their lives. But what would a real love story look like from beginning to end? Imagine two young people who know and understand real love in a world that doesn't. What is their life like before they meet? What happens when they find each other? For the sake of the story, let's say they decide to marry. How do they make that decision? What is their marriage like? How do they live in the community, raise their kids, grow old together? How does the other feel and act when one of them dies? That's a lot of questions. And the writer says, I know that story could be the length of an epic novel and way beyond the scope of a Tuesday night video chat, but it could be also condensed down to a sort of like fairy tale. And yeah, it really can. My ultimate question is, would we be interested in the story? Would we cry and laugh like we do with imitation love stories? Would it sell? I know that I would like to hear such a story for a change. So if I can possibly remember, I'll write such a story. I've written one novel. I'm in the process of working on a second. One of these days I've got to write a book like this. The question is, would it sell? We'll see. So I probably will, but I can tell you what the story is like. I can tell you from experience. It's not a fairy tale. I'm not guessing. And I can tell you not because I know two people who were raised with unconditional love and then have gone through that entire process of marrying and raising children and grandchildren. I don't, which is really kind of scary, isn't it? That in all of my travels, having met tens of thousands of people, I have never met two such people. That doesn't mean they're not there. I just haven't met them. But what I can do is combine my experience with real children who have been raised in unconditional love, and then I can give you the story, and I can take that up to like early teens, real children that I know who've been raised from the beginning loving, and then I can take it from there and tell you the story of real teens who have then found real love because, well, their parents did, and changed the rest of their lives. And then, see, the farthest I can take the story is 20 years, because that's how long I've been doing this. But see, then I can go 20 years with them, and then I can pick up hundreds of other people I know who are in their mid-30s and go from there until we get till they're 90 years old. So I can create the story from parts of real stories. I just can't give you a continuous real story. So this is going to be brief. I'm not going to write the novel right here. But let's say that the young girl's name is oddly Sylvie. And the young boy's name is, well, I can't resist, Fred, whoever. They might be smart. They might not. Turns out it doesn't really matter. You don't have to be smart to be happy. They would tend to do well in school. They tend to do well in school, make it in the present tense, because they're not distracted by fear, anger, rebellion, drugs, alcohol, sex, all that stuff. So they tend to focus well on school because of the teachers do not get this. You don't have to yell at kids to motivate them. You don't have to do work on a computer. There was a recent study that showed that if kids use computers, then their retention increases. They're missing the point. Kids naturally enjoy learning. Really. Just like kids naturally use crayons. They naturally paint with finger paint. They naturally like to learn. And then we beat it out of them by grading them. So these two kids who feel unconditionally loved do well in school. They might play tennis or football or whatever, but they play for fun, not to compete and win. This would seem kind of strange to their classmates, but they're also seen as different in a good way. They avoid the addictions of the world. They're not having sex in stairwells in middle school, which is really very common. No drugs, no alcohol. Why? Because their parents tell them not to use drugs or alcohol? No, because it would look stupid to these kids because they're happy. It would just be unattractive. So these two people, Sylvie and Fred, they meet each other eventually, and they recognize in each other a similar yearning for truth, being loving. People can feel that. You can feel when people are dangerous. You can feel when people are using. You can feel when people are seductive. We can feel when people are honest and loving. I don't ever ask people when I hold them. And I have sat, thousands of people in my lap. And all those years, I think I mentioned this before, but there's been less than 5 people who've refused. They can sense that I'm not going to hurt them or use them. These two people will recognize the sanity in each other. They'll recognize that they're not like the rest of the world. They'll be immediately drawn together, let's say, in this case. They may be drawn to another person who is loving like this, but since we're talking about Sylvie and Fred, we're going to stick with that. They learn about each other. They marry. Why? Why would they marry? Well, they're similar ages. They're both truthful. They both are already loving and want to continue to learn to be loving. And it turns out that they each have qualities in the other that they also just flat enjoy. That's okay. It doesn't then become a source of imitation love. It's just fun. All the forms of imitation love, humor, intelligence, creativity, all those things simply become fun if they're built on the foundation of real love. So these two marry each other not just because of similar interests in loving, but because they like each other. Everybody has these native qualities. Everybody is either funny, kind, intuitive, witty, something. Maybe not all of them, but they all have them. They have children. Why? Because they just can't wait to share the love that they have with little kids. Their kids get sick. They get sick. Their kids get grouchy. One of their children might die. These things still happen in a real love relationship. But it doesn't kill them. Do they grieve? And so one of your questions was, would people laugh? Would they cry? People in real love are hysterical. They actually observe the insane behaviors of the people around them way better than the insane people do. So they're funny people. So yes, you'd laugh, you'd cry as you saw one of their children die. So would they. But it wouldn't end them because they have so much more love in their lives for each other, for their children. They're anchored in it. They have lots of disagreements. They're not the same people. But disagreements are easy. As long as I know that Donna cares about me. I know she loves me. As long as she knows that I love her. We disagree about our approaches to lots of things. We have very different tastes. But the disagreements last for seconds. They're easily solved. Huge difference between a disagreement and a conflict. So, same with Sylvia and Fred. They have friends. They have friends not just in a real love community. No, they have friends from every stratum of life. Poor friends, rich friends, funny ones, dull ones, smart ones, dumb ones, loving ones, and not. But they would tend to attract more people into their sphere. They would tend to attract more loving people, oddly. They would also tend to attract unloving people who are fascinated by what they have to offer. One of them will likely die before the other. The other will grieve. But again, death doesn't eliminate love. So they'd still be happy. Interesting question. A loving life is more interesting. Would it sell? Don't know. People have become so attached to sex, violence, and bad language, it might be considered boring. But it wouldn't be to everybody. A loving life is more interesting because you see more, you feel more, you connect more. It's happier on every imaginable level. Just doing fun things are more fun. Sex is better. Everything is better with a foundation of unconditional love. Whether it would sell, don't know, because these days, look at what's on TV. I don't ever watch live TV, but occasionally I get to flip through it. And we love watching the equivalent of the Colosseum in the Romans' day, but emotionally. We like watching an emotional Colosseum where gladiators just assassinate each other. Reality shows like Survivor and The Bachelor, and I've seen, and it's not fair that I judge these things because I think the longest I've ever seen any of these is probably 4.5 minutes. But everything I saw was competition. It was mean-spirited. The audience adores, and I know that because if they didn't, it wouldn't be on there and they wouldn't have the ratings they do. They adore seeing somebody kicked off the island or rejected by the judges in some talent competition or rejected by The Bachelor, or we just love that stuff. We like watching somebody else beat up instead of us. A real love story is just way cooler. And I know a bit about it, so I'm not guessing. I know a man who's worried about his job endlessly, doing it right, making mistakes, not displeasing the boss, being angry at his assistants, blah, 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 the usual stuff that people worry about at work, and the reasons that they come home from work stressed. Rarely do I see people stressed by their job. I had a very busy job when I was a surgeon, but I was almost never stressed by the job. What stresses people is fear and contention and worrying about what other people will think. One drama after another, as is the case with this man that I'm talking about. And I spent a couple of days with him, and it was like watching the sunrise. No kidding. or watching somebody rise from the grave. He woke up, and he woke up like in every imaginable way, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. It was just a gorgeous thing. And he called to say, just the other day, he called to say, he said, I just had a perfect day at work. He said, everything went right. He said, my assistants helped me. They enjoyed being around me. I didn't yell at anybody. He has a fussy, impossible boss. I mean, picture Cruella de Vil, and you're, kind of in the ballpark. And she arrived, and she's never happy. Always just throwing out demands and yelling at people. No matter what you say to her, she finds something wrong with it. No kidding. The sun is up. Well, it's too hot. The sun is not up. Well, I'm cold. She's just one of those. You just can't please. And so as soon as he saw her, he got out a piece of paper and a pencil, and he said, "What can I do to help you?" You can imagine how people treat Cruella de Vil. People do not smile when Cruella walks into the room. People do not offer what they can do to help. People make excuses. They run. They avoid her. He said she actually laughed out loud because nobody ever treats her like that. She was amused. Now, she didn't quite know what to do with it, but she cracked a smile, which apparently is an unusual event, kind of like a lunar eclipse. They tend to avoid her and argue with her. He said, I feel so peaceful about my job right now. This is the guy who hated his job. He said, if I got fired today, I wouldn't even care. He said, I'm not trying so hard anymore. And the less I try, the easier things get, and nothing fails to get done. And that's what it's like to live a real love life. In, again, kind of answering a part of the question about a real love fairy tale that was asked at the top of the video chat, although they didn't ask about work. Everything's easier. Somebody called me. I remember this now. Somebody called me and they said, sometimes I make detailed notes and sometimes I don't. This is a don't. And they said, I just need a hug. Well, we'd done that for a number of days in a row. And yet this person continued to get more sick and more worried. It was not helping. So I said, so what are you doing? What are you doing so that you remember that you're loved instead of just calling to say, I need to be reminded that I'm loved? She said, well, I repeat the 5 truths. And I said, repeat them for me. She said, you love me, God loves me, I'm not alone. I said, well, that might be the problem. So I said, slow down, stop thinking, stop talking, stop breathing. I put my hand in the middle of my chest. I said, now, you do the same thing. So she put her hand in the middle of her chest. I think we're on Skype, but I can't remember for sure. Maybe not. And I said, the idea isn't to just repeat these truths. When you put your hand in the middle of your chest, the idea is to remember that I was right there. When I was holding you, the middle of my chest was right in the middle of your chest. The idea is to remember the love that you've received, not just chant it like a nursery rhyme. When you feel loved, you hear even the word stupid. Because when I'm talking to people who do feel loved and they're describing their behavior, I will often laugh out loud and say, well, that was pretty stupid. When you feel loved, you hear even the word stupid as a kiss. Really. Everything becomes a kiss. Everything becomes I love you. Every word becomes I love you. When you don't feel loved, it becomes an attack. It's all about how you feel. This particular lady has been addicted all of her life to feeling bad, feeling drama, feeling sick, feeling bad all the time. No matter, in the past, before I spent some time with her, no matter who asked her, she could always describe something that was wrong. And she said, but why would I be addicted to feeling bad? Well, it's what you know. It's what you think you're worth. And when you feel bad and you tell other people that you feel bad all day, every day, it really frees you from responsibility. No kidding. If you feel bad and you create a drama and you feel sick and you tell people that, who's ever going to call you to be accountable? Who's ever going to say, well, did you get your homework done? That's why kids go to school and say, I was sick. Because it gives them an excuse to not do stuff. My best friend in high school, Wayne, was a cross-country runner. And he learned this trick early on in life. I thought it was a pretty cool trick. He learned that his coach would drive all the cross-country runners till they were, till they fell over. But he learned that if he threw up, the coach would say, well, that's enough for today, and he'd send him into rest. So my friend, I don't know how he does this. I've never known anybody else who can. But he could just throw up on command. He'd just go, oh, time to throw up, and he'd throw up. So when he got halfway through practice, he'd throw up, and his coach would send him in to rest. We all tend to have a version of throwing up. No kidding. Well, I just don't feel very good. And then nobody asks us to do anything. In this particular woman's case, she didn't feel very good all the time. And she really worked it. Our kids will do that with us. Students will do it with us. Our coworkers, our employees. You'll discover that the happier people feel, the less sick they get. And in this particular lady's case, she's only just lately, just like in the last 2 days, in fact, began to let the love in, really feel it, because she was genuinely addicted to feeling bad. She said, in fact, today she was just bawling, and she said, I think I feel it now. This feels better than feeling sick. This feels better than the drama. This feels better than the stuff I create in my mind that has made me irresponsible and unhappy, but also kept me free from having to do anything. It all goes away when we feel genuinely loved, which takes finding, trusting, all that we've talked about before. Somebody was reviewing recent video chats. Don't know from what time period, but she said recent. And she said, you talk a lot about victimhood. She said, it must be like the worst behavior. Yeah, I probably do talk about victimhood a lot, but why? It's not that victimhood is the worst. It just tends to be the first. So the first thing is pain. Pain is first, not even victimhood, not even fear. We experience pain, and then the natural thing to do is to look around for the cause of the pain. Duh. I mean, a rock hits you in the head, you look around for the second rock that might be sailing through the air. You stumble. Watch somebody who stumbles. The first thing they do is look to see what they stumbled on so that maybe they won't do that the second time. So pain is first. We look around for the cause, and there are pretty much just two options. Yeah, occasionally we stumble on a rock, but mostly the options are, I caused my own pain by being stupid and making a dumb choice, or somebody else caused my pain. Well, this isn't hard to figure out. If I determine that I caused my pain, well then the solution would lie with me, and I'd have to change the way that I either think about things, perceive things, feel, behave, and so on. And man, that sounds distressingly like responsibility. So we tend to be more likely to blame other people. That's where victimhood comes in. Victimhood is just blaming other people. That's all. other people hurt me, other people didn't treat me right, other people didn't compliment me, other people didn't value me. In fact, we'll even sit around and worry about other people's disapproval, which is a kind of future victimhood, a kind of preemptive victimhood. We're just victims all the time. And we feel victimized by so much. I mean, and we'll do anything to get these feelings of pain to go away. It all starts with pain. So it's only pain. So what? Instead of blaming people, let's just understand the cause of the pain, and we're involved as a cause of the pain almost every single time, and then come up with a solution, as opposed to going through the whole, oh, let's act like let's feel like victims, and then let's get mad at somebody, and then let's blame somebody, and then let's use drugs, and whatever. It just turns into a quagmire. It's pain. Solve the pain. If the pain is a lifetime of not feeling loved, then let's get to that. I hear this question every single day. Without fail, I hear this question. In fact, today I said to somebody, if you ask me that question again, I will hang up. Which sounds a little harsh, I suppose. But it's because I've answered the question. In fact, I said to this person, a guy, I said, how many times have I answered that question? He said, a lot, 200 times. Here's the question. Why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep moaning, whining, complaining, acting like a victim, drinking, using women for sex? Pick a thing. Why do I keep doing this? I remember who it was. The guy kept saying, why do I keep obsessing about my ex-wife? I said, pain. Are you listening this time? It's always pain. Pain is the why to everything. Every time we make a choice that is unproductive or unloving. You have a lifetime of pain from not being loved by your parents. And when you got married, it was your first time to fall in love. And it was. You fell in love crazy head over heels. I mean, like, wow. This is heaven. And then it turned out like most falling in love. The imitation love wore off. You became unhappy. She became really unhappy. She started cheating on you and having sex with other guys. She started berating you, blaming you. And even though he's been divorced from this woman for, 10 years, all he thinks about from morning till night is this woman. Heather, we'll call her. Every time I talk to Heather, I'm still thinking about Heather. Heather is dead. Your idea of what Heather is was actually never alive. She said, well, she doesn't love me anymore. Heather has never loved you. Heather will never love you. Heather doesn't love anybody. Heather doesn't love, in fact, the child that you share together. Heather doesn't love the present guy she's with. She doesn't love the previous 6 guys she's been with since she's divorced you. It's the same answer. And yet we keep looking for something else. Well, maybe if I wore the right aftershave, Heather would fall in love with me again. Well, if you listen to the commercials, you would, I guess, probably tend to believe that. It's pain. And the pain always predates the event that you think is causing your pain. When we understand that, it sure gets a lot easier to understand life. I'm waxing unusually philosophical today. I talked to a woman and on the phone just a few days ago. All of these stories that I tell you happen within, no kidding, every video chat is made up of stories that I could pick out of pretty much any 2 days. And her first words were, I have a fear. And her conversations start like that fairly consistently. This time, just for fun, I said, fear of what? I had a dream. Golly. Be afraid of, excuse me, be afraid of a rabid dog. Be afraid of a meteor shower if you see the atmosphere directly above you burning up. Be afraid of anthrax if it was just, puffed in your face. But afraid of a dream, that's really making stuff up. And she does this all the time. Afraid of a dream, afraid of a past memory, afraid of a an argument that hasn't yet happened, but might. Sheesh. I said, honey, you always have a fear. It's almost like you make them up. It's like when you call, you go, gotta have a fear. What would be a good one? So you fill your mind with fears and drama, and you become addicted to them, much like the lady I was talking about earlier. Now that she sees the addiction, we'll see if we can get her out of it, which we'll do in a very similar way to the pattern that I've been discussing all during this chat. Here's somebody who said, I watched the most recent video chat right after talking to my son on the phone. I've been letting go of the guilt, feeling bad, and the doubt about my decision to divorce my husband. Each day is better than the day before. You have a lot of cultural expectations to overcome. In your family, no divorce. In your church, nope, no divorce. The people you know disapprove of divorce. And so you're going to hear a lot of disapproval, spoken and unspoken. You're going to hear it in your head. That's a lot to overcome. You make the best decision you can. You decided to divorce your husband, then that decision's done. You're finished with that. You can't go back and change that decision. Now you move on, and frankly, it doesn't matter what the entire world tells you about it. You did the best you could. You continue. But I'm on the phone with my son, and oh my, he had been avoiding the reality of the divorce, but he said the other day he just broke down and cried and cried. Now, keep in mind, kid, that he is not sad for you. Just because that's one of the things that you might be thinking. There are a lot of reasons for him to be sad. He's sad and frightened for himself. How will he look being now a child of divorced parents? What does this mean about his childhood? That it was all a lie? That he was brought up in a far more defective home than he'd thought before? What does this mean about his future chances of success in marriage? What does this mean, in fact, about his entire life? How much of it's been a lie? If he's just now realizing, and apparently it was a surprise to him, that your marriage, which appeared to be good on the outside, was a lie, what does that mean about his life? Maybe everything he believes is a lie. Maybe his religious or spiritual beliefs are a lie. Or maybe he doesn't even know who he is. It's all that. It's not a concern for you, but you just need to know that his tears are just filled with grief and sadness and confusion. You said, I was so sad for him, so sad. I noticed that my guilt barometer was fairly low, but my taking on his pain and sadness was pretty high. I don't want him to suffer. But even way more than that, I don't want him to be like us, like me and his father. I want to save him from the pain and the heartache of his parents' failed marriage. I know. You're going to say, I can't. I know. People tell me this a lot, by the way. They ask me a question and they say, I know what you're going to say, which of course makes me wonder why they're asking me a question. Actually, I wasn't going to say that. You can actually do a lot to save him from the heartache of a failed marriage. You're not helpless here. Now, you can't save him, but you can educate him and love him and give him the power to save himself. You now have an opportunity to tell him what really happened with both of you. What we tend to do is, it's the old bromide, which is awful. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Well, sometimes that's good advice, really. But when it comes to children, especially children who can understand, and your son isn't a kid, I mean, he's in his 20s. When it comes to kids, even age 8, 10 and up, if you don't tell them the real reason you got divorced, you're going to be really sorry later on. Because when they figure it out, they're going to come to you and ask you why you didn't prepare them, why you lied to them, why you didn't tell them, why you didn't tell them the real reason, which would have kept them from assuming that they were the cause of the divorce. I'm not making this up. Kids who find out later the cause of the divorce are just on fire, mad at their parents that they didn't trust them. So instead of protecting yourself and protecting your now ex-husband, teach him something. Teach him something he can learn. Teach him how you were not emotionally prepared to love your husband. Tell him that. Say, I did not unconditionally love your father. I thought I did. I tried to, but I didn't. Teach him how your husband was not emotionally prepared to love you. But you also get to add, for example, that he wasn't willing to learn. Now, maybe he wasn't able either. It's not an attack. But see, your kids aren't as stupid as you think. We tend to try to hide the truth from them. When you tell your son, your father just, not only was he not emotionally prepared to get married and to stay married, he wasn't emotionally prepared to learn what it took to stay married. Your son couldn't possibly be surprised by this. I mean, he's been around his dad all of his life. And if his dad wasn't emotionally there for you, it's a lock. It's a guarantee that he wasn't emotionally there for his son, your son, either. Now, sometimes I'll get a parent who says, well, no, his dad always was there emotionally for him. And I ask more questions, and it turns out that emotionally there means they went boating and camping, and they spent money, and they watched video games, and that's not emotionally there. Or they went drinking together. That's one of my favorites. Teach your son how much genuine attention it takes to make a marriage work. It's obvious that he's utterly naive about this, about all of this. And wow, is this a great opportunity to teach him from your own experiences, having done it wrong in a marriage, and from your own experiences now having learned what love is. You're not going to get a better teaching moment than this, kid. You continue. I remembered what a friend of mine said recently. She told me that when she was in college, her parents went through a difficult time in their marriage. She remembers feeling very sad and that it was a challenge to many of her core beliefs. She said, if my parents' marriage wasn't true, what else wasn't true? We talked about that just a little bit ago. She started questioning everything. It was like her solid foundation of trust and love was being shaken to the core, which is what we were talking about. And if you don't teach your son what really happened, it may very well shake his world to the core, as opposed to, instead of having him question every core belief in who he is, you just explain that you two were not sufficiently emotionally prepared to get married or keep a marriage. But then you say, but I'm going to teach you how, so that you don't have to do that. Now he doesn't have to question everything about his life. You continue. When my parents divorced, I doubted my own validity. If they didn't belong together, where did I fit in? Did I belong anywhere? If their marriage was a mistake, and it was a horrible marriage, then what does that make me? Does that make me a mistake? Yep, you got the picture. Hence the need for you to teach your kid. I vowed over and over again to never be like my parents. And I did overcome many of their terrible tendencies, but I still found myself with the same end result, divorce. Yeah, except that now you've found a way to be happy, which your parents likely never did. And sadly, it's not enough just to resolve not to be something. Well, I will not be like my parents. It just leads you to be something else that doesn't work. Like learning a piano piece that requires any level of skill or any other skill. It's not enough just to hear wrong, wrong, wrong. I could do that with you while teaching you a piano concerto, and you would never learn it. Not in this lifetime. We have to learn how to do things right. You continue. On the video chat, you talked to me. You reminded me of what I'd written about my sadness being part of the human experience, part of my journey, that it's okay to feel sad. It's human. Hearing you talk to me, it also felt like you were looking at me when you said it, brought tears to my eyes. I took a deep breath and said to myself, this is part of my son's human experience. Pain, grief, change, learning, growing, falling down, being disappointed, being disillusioned. Yes, honey, it really is. You can't take that from him. Many parents try to. They try to eliminate all the pain and grief from their children's lives, and their children end up useless. I know a man who's 50 years old. He's been supported from the time he was a little kid. 50. He's never had to work a day in his life, and he never will. And he's never learned responsibility. He's not retarded. He's not mentally ill. He's just completely irresponsible because all his parents ever did was eliminate his pain. If this kid was uncomfortable at the school he was at, poof, they sent him to another school. If somebody bullied him, they'd send somebody to end it. So they babied this kid, and this guy's now 50 years old, never worked, doesn't know how to do anything, and lives with a 51-year-old woman who is his babysitter. You don't want to save your children from the trials in life, or how do they learn? You continue, and you told me that I did the best I could. Yes, I did. I have to be okay with that. The holes that I've left in my children and the holes I will make in the future, ouch, are not mine to fill. Maybe God will. Maybe God will do it. God knew I would leave the holes. I cannot be everything my children need, although that is what I want to be, everything. I'm good enough with all my mistakes. I have enough love. It feels good. It's not my job to be everything. With divorce, I realized that kids do not need to know the how and the why. Well, you're doing great till you got to that last line. Kids that age do need to know, and we've been talking about that. Otherwise, they make their own assumptions, which are terrible. But they do need to know, you continue, are they loved? And I do want to make sure my kids feel loved. Help me with this. I'm afraid of making more holes. In this moment, I have a lot of fear. Just tell them the truth, honey, about you, about him, about the effects of insufficient love. Teach them what love looks like. Teach them what parental instruction looks like. And you'll be okay. You'll be enough. Really, you will. If you get to a place where you feel like you're not, ask somebody who knows. There are lots of people who do. Unusually late for this particular segment, but this is Sylvie. The Sylvie moment, the Sylvie corner. At age, apparently this is from the past, Sylvie's now 4, but my daughter writes that at age 2, when Sylvie was learning the alphabet, she would sing, this is really clever. I had to read this twice to pick up on the cleverness of this. She would sing A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I'm okay. So she gets both the I and the K in there. I guess the J doesn't matter. H, I'm okay. L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, whatever the rest of it is, T, U, V, W, X, and I'm happy. I like her version better than the other one. A mother writes me. She said that she has a husband who has, actually this was a phone call, come to think of it. She was describing that her husband has a more regimented, stiff way of parenting, which shouldn't be a great big huge surprise since he's in the military and trains recruits. So he's more regimented, and she says, I talked to him and I said, we need, which is a little ironic because her tone of voice was like she was the drill instructor. She said, we need to be on the same page and raise our daughter, who's 9, I think, or 10, more alike, and then blah, blah, blah. She gave him a lecture. And so she asked me what I thought of it. I said, no, honey, you really don't. He's him and you're you. He can't be you. He can only be him. And if some of that's a little regimented and stiff, I know him. He's not regimented and stiff all the time. He does have that sort of military demeanor, but and then you bring you. In a marriage, you don't average people. You both do something to add to the relationship and to add to your child. And besides, adding's better than averaging. So you do kind of need to be on the same page about, like, that she needs to do her homework, and it's nice to be on the same page about, yeah, she has chores, and bedtime is 8 o'clock, not midnight. So yes, about some routines, be on the same page. But no, about your style, you can't modify somebody else's style. Unless their style involves, punching your kid in the face. But not many parents do that. Add, don't average. This is a young woman. Well, young to me, 30. So unhappy. Has been unhappy for, 30 years. Addicted to work. Addicted to bad relationships. When I first met her, her face was just contorted in pain. And in the beginning, she mostly fought and argued and withdrew, and she finally got fed up with this way of living, which was miserable, and she had to prove it over and over again, which many of us do. And she decided to trust me. So she began to feel loved. She began to feel happy, like a lot happier. She asked me, do I need an intervention? I said, nope. Many of you who are listening to me have heard me recommend interventions to people, but these are people who arrive in such a state of fear and confusion that it would be unimaginable that a group would get to their issues fast enough to make any difference. They'd fall back in the week between groups further than they went forward. I said, no, you really don't, because the whole reason really for an intervention is to establish trust with somebody who wouldn't otherwise be able to do it by phone or Skype or email. Pretty hard to establish trust with somebody by email. And weeks later, after our conversation, after a group, apparently in the group, people were saying that pain is just part of growth, and how pain is normal, and everybody was in pain. And she said to me, I don't know that I believe that. She said, do we really have to have pain? She said, right now, this was an unbelievable utterance from her, much like the guy who said, I just had a perfect day at work. She said, right now, I can't imagine having any pain. I said, whoa, stop, don't speak. Don't say anything more. Say that sentence again. She said, right now, I can't imagine having any pain. Holy smokes. Now, sure, pain will come, but do we have to have it? Not as often as we think. We can mostly choose how much pain. Pretty hard to choose none. We were talking about the fairy tale between Sylvie and Fred. Their kids are going to get sick. Their kids may end up in the hospital. They may have a kid that dies. One of them may die. That will be painful. But pain is a whole lot like random thoughts. Random thoughts will enter our heads. But then I get to choose what I do with them, whether I feed them or whether I throw them out. Same with pain. It's going to happen. But if I feed it and moan about it and complain about it and make it the center focus of my life, it's going to last forever. So this lady was saying, when I do a check-in, she said, check-in in group, she said, this last time, she said, I'm happy. And she said, I was surprised at the reaction. She said the wise men and wise women in the group kept pushing her to, it was like, they didn't trust her until she expressed some pain. And she said, I didn't have any to tell them. I almost made something up. It's understandable because so many people do lie about their pain and hide it, that it's understandable that sometimes group leaders or group hosts push for the pain that people are not expressing. But sometimes people need to get to check in and just go, I'm just kind of ecstatically happy. There's some mornings that I wake up and go, is it okay to be this happy? Because I feel perfect. And the answer is, yeah, it really is. This same woman. When people are learning, this is a separate conversation, they teach us a lot. Yesterday she said, I promised this, it was another phone call, Skype call, I think. She said, I'd promised somebody that I would help them with their taxes today. So she's saying, yesterday I promised them today. But when I woke up this morning, I didn't want to. I didn't have some great reason. I wasn't sick. I didn't have a sore throat. I just didn't want to. And I had been teaching her for quite some time, you're never really going to find out who you are until you make some choices that make some people pretty unhappy. Sometimes you just have to do what you want, or you're never going to figure out who you are. If you're always obsessed with doing what you should, what somebody else is telling you to do, well, then you become kind of an extension of those people. You don't really know who you are. I'm not saying that if you decide, oh, I just want to kill the next door neighbor because it was loud last night. No, don't go crazy. But sometimes we just have to say no and do what we want to do. So she texted them and said, I'm not going to be there. She said, I immediately spiraled into, what have I done? She was going to blame it on me, of course. She said, oh no, they'll be disappointed and they'll be disapproving and blah, blah, blah. And she went, ah! It really was terrible for her. She said it got worse and worse in my head. So instead of spiraling further, I called the person that I had said I'm not coming to, and I told them, I didn't explain why, I just told them I was afraid. I said, I just sent you a text that I'm not going to be there. Now I'm feeling all afraid that you're going to think terrible of me. And they said, oh, it's no problem. The taxes don't have to be done this minute. In fact, they don't have to be done for a month. So come over when you can. And she went, it was over. I would have turned this into a 2-day panic before. It was over. So now, back to what I said to her. It's not about the spiral. It's not about your fear. It's how you stopped it. You just told the truth. Woohoo. You talked to the person involved. And then you talked to me on Skype. Beautiful. It doesn't matter if we have fear. It doesn't matter if we have pain. It doesn't matter if we make mistakes. It doesn't matter. It matters what we do with it. Really. It doesn't matter if we fall down. It matters whether we get up. In her case, it was a huge mark of progress that she did that. Her spiraling of fear, which didn't last very long, was just information, not an indication that she was bad. So, very impressive, my dear. You would have gone into the sewer for days. It's just very cool what you did with this. Now, can I do that one? Husband and wife. He has had a business for many years. And she decided to establish a business so that partly she'd have something to do, partly she'd have a sense of fulfillment, and partly so she'd bring some extra income into the family. And in the beginning, he helped her with the project because he knew more about business than she did. And when she called, it was like the whole world was on fire, because the more successful she became at the business, the less she asked him for help and the more he offered it. And eventually, he stuck his nose into the point where he was going to potentially ruin her business because he was interfering with the business partner she had and so on. It appeared to be absolutely unsolvable. He had X amount of time invested. She had X amount of time and money invested. They were just going at it. I've done more. No, I've done more. This was threatening to end their marriage. And I got to say, for a minute, I was baffled. There were too many pieces of data involved. And then the answer occurred to me. I said to him, Fred, just trust her. Just trust her. I said, how's the business going? He said, well, it's good, but nope. Don't want the but. How's it going? It's going fine. It's making money. It's growing. And now you want to stick your nose in it so that you can be seen to be more of a founding partner. You guys are already partners. You're already married. So why not, just like I was saying earlier with the woman who said her husband had to parent her way. No, I told her, just trust him to love your daughter in his way. Add to each other. Don't average. And I told the same thing to this couple, although I'd never associated those two stories actually. Trust her and let her do it her way. I know her. She's not going to run it into the ground. She's trustworthy. She's competent. You trusted her enough to marry her and have a child with her. So now back out. Trust her. She bawled. She just thought that was the coolest thing. And he did. And they texted me a day later and said, everything's fine. Great relationships are not established because of rules or treaties or agreements or regimenting things. Great relationships are established because the two partners trust each other. And that's in marriage. It's in a parent-child relationship. It's in business. Trust is the only thing that transcends fear. And I say trust because in the end, you're trusting love more than controlling. Love is the most powerful force in the universe, but you have no access to love until you trust. Hence, the importance of trust. So, same message for all of us. We keep finding love. We trust it when we find it. We remember it. And then we share it when we can. And we just naturally become loving human beings, loving partners, loving parents, loving husbands, loving wives, loving everything. And then we create that fairy tale that I outlined earlier on. It's a pretty fun fairy tale. It's a pretty fun life. See you next week.